reading session. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Magnanatimirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svaparantikam Pandeham Sri Guru Sri Yutapatakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrijatam Sahaganaraguna Tanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakanvitamscha हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीन बंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवारी पाशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Okay, Hari Bol. So today we read chapter 32 prayers by the personified Vedas. But this is very long chapter, so I don't think we can finish. So let's read. Let's read where we read. Haribol. Okay, so prayers by the personified Vedas. King Parikshit inquired from Sukadeva Goswami about a very important topic in understanding transcendental subject matter. His question was, since Vedic knowledge generally deals with the subject matter of the three qualities of the material world, how then can it approach the subject matter of transcendence, which is beyond the approach of the three material modes? Since the mind is material and the vibration of words is material sound, how can the Vedic knowledge expressing by material sound the thoughts of the mind approach transcendence? Description of a subject matter necessitates describing its source of emanation, its qualities, and its activities. Such description can be possible only by thinking with the material mind and by vibrating material words. Although Brahman, or the Absolute Truth, has no material qualities, or power of speaking does not go beyond the material qualities. How then can Brahman, the Absolute Truth, be described by our words? I do not see how it is possible to understand transcendence from such expressions of material sound. The purpose of King Parikshit's inquiring was to ascertain from Sukadev Goswami whether the Vedas ultimately describe the Absolute Truth as impersonal or as personal. Understanding of the Absolute Truth progresses in three features: impersonal Brahman, Paramatma localized in everyone's heart, and at last the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The Vedas deal with three departments of activities. One is called Karmakanda, or activities under Vedic injunction, which gradually purify one to understand his real position. The next is Jnanakanda, the process of understanding the Absolute Truth by speculative methods. And the third is Upasana Kanda, or worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and sometimes of the demigods also. The worship of the demigods recommended in the Vedas is ordered with the understanding of the demigods' relationship to the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has many parts and parcels. Some are called Svamshas, or his personal expansions, and some are called Vibhinnamshas, the living entities. All such expansions, both Svamshas and Vibhinnamshas, are emanations from the original personality of Godhead. Svamsha expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, whereas the Vibhinnamsha expansions are called Jiva Tattva. The different demigods are Jiva Tattva. The conditioned souls are generally put into activities of the material world for sense gratification. Therefore, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, to regulate those who are very much addicted to different kinds of sense gratification, the worship of demigods is sometimes recommended. For example, for persons who are very much addicted to meat eating, the Vedic injunction recommends that after worshipping the form of the goddess Kali and sacrificing a goat, not any other animal, under Karma Kanda regulation, the worshippers may be allowed to eat meat. The idea is not to encourage one to eat meat, but to allow one who is persistent to eat meat under certain restricted conditions. Therefore, worship of the demigods is not worship of the absolute truth, but by worshipping the demigods, one gradually comes to accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead in an indirect way. This indirect acceptance is described in the Bhagavad Gita as avidhi. Avidhi means not bona fide. Since demigod worship is not bona fide, the impersonalists stress concentration on the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. King Parikshit's question was, which is the ultimate target of Vedic knowledge? This concentration on the impersonal feature of the absolute truth or concentration on the personal feature? After all, both the impersonal and personal features of the Supreme Lord are beyond our material conception. The impersonal feature of the absolute truth, the Brahman effulgence, is but the rays of the personal body of Krishna. These rays of the personal body of Krishna are cast all over the creation of the world, and the portion of the effulgence which is covered by material cloud is called the created cosmos of the three material qualities, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. How can persons who are within this clouded portion called the material world conceive of the absolute truth by speculative method? In answering King Parikshit's question, Shukadev Goswami replied that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has created the mind, senses, and living force for the purpose of sense gratification in transmigration from one kind of body to another, as well as for the purpose of allowing liberation from the material conditions. In other words, the senses, mind, and living force can be utilized for sense gratification and transmigration from one body to another, or for the matter of liberation. The Vedic injunctions are there just to give the conditioned soul the chance for sense gratification under regulatory principles, and thereby also give them the chance for promotion to the higher conditions of life. Ultimately, if the consciousness is purified, one comes to his original position and goes back home, back to Godhead. The living force is intelligent. One therefore has to utilize his intelligence over the mind and the senses. When the mind and senses are purified by the proper use of intelligence, then the conditioned soul is liberated. Otherwise, if the intelligence is not properly utilized in controlling the senses and mind, the conditioned soul continues to transmigrate from one kind of body to another, simply for sense gratification. Another point clearly stated in the answer of Sukadev Goswami is that Lord created the mind, senses, and intelligence of the individual living force. It is not stated that the living entities themselves were ever created. Just as the shining particles of the sun rays are always existing along with the sun, the living entities exist externally as parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The conditioned souls, although eternally existing as part of the Supreme Lord, are sometimes put within the cloud of the material concept of life, in the darkness of ignorance. The whole Vedic process is to alleviate that darkened condition. Ultimately, when the senses and mind of the conditioned being become fully purified, he then comes to the original position called Krishna consciousness, and that is liberation. In the Vedanta Sutra, the first sutra are called questions about the absolute truth, Athato Brahma Jignasa, What is the nature of the absolute truth? The next sutra answers that the nature of the absolute truth is that he is the origin of everything. Whatever we experience, even in this material condition of life, is but an emanation from him. The absolute truth created the mind and senses and intelligence. This means that the absolute truth is not without mind, intelligence, and senses. In other words, he is not impersonal. The very word created means that he has transcendental intelligence. For example, when the father begets a child, the child has senses because the father also has senses. The child is born with the hands and legs because the father also has hands and legs. Sometimes it is said, therefore, that man is made after the image of God. The absolute truth is therefore the supreme personality, with transcendental mind, senses, and intelligence. When one's mind, intelligence, and senses are purified of material contamination, one can understand the original feature of the absolute truth as a person. The Vedic process is to gradually promote the conditioned soul from the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion, and from the mode of passion to the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, there is sufficient light for understanding things as they are. Hare Krishna. Anyone can continue. Devo.
For example, from earth a tree grows, and from the wood of the tree fire is ignited. In that igniting process, we first of all find the smoke, and the next stage is heat, and then fire. When there is actually fire, we can utilize it for various purposes. Therefore, fire is the ultimate goal. Similarly, in the gross material stage of life, the quality of ignorance is very much prominent. Dissipation of this ignorance takes place in the gradual progress of civilization from the barbarian stage to civilized life. And when one comes to the form of civilized life, he is said to be in the mode of passion. In the barbarian stage, or in the mode of ignorance, the senses are gratified in a very crude way, whereas in the mode of passion, or in the civilized stage of life, the senses are gratified in a polished manner. But when one is promoted to the mode of goodness, one can understand that the senses and the mind are only engaged in material activities due to being covered by perverted consciousness. When this perverted consciousness is gradually transformed into Krishna consciousness, then the path of liberation is opened. So it is not that one is unable to approach the absolute truth by the senses and the mind. The conclusion is rather that the senses, mind, and intelligence in the gross stage of contamination cannot appreciate the nature of the absolute truth. But when purified, the senses, mind, and intelligence can understand what the absolute truth is. This purifying process is called devotional service or Krishna consciousness. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to understand Krishna, and Krishna is understood by devotional service, beginning with the process of surrender. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, one has to think of Krishna always. One has to render loving service to Krishna always. One has to always worship and bow down before Krishna. By this process only can one enter into the kingdom of God without any doubt. When one is enlightened in the mode of goodness by the process of devotional service, he is freed from the modes of ignorance and passion. The word Atmane indicates the stage of Brahminical qualification in which one is allowed to study the Vedic literature, oh, that's the word I never, literature, known as the Upanishads. The Upanishads describe in different ways the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Lord. Okay, there's Upanishads. Oh, I read that so like asleep. Described in different ways. The absolute truth, the Supreme Lord, is called Nirguna. That does not mean that he has no qualities. It is only because he has qualities that the conditioned living entities can have. He has qualities that the conditioned living entities can have qualities. It's only because he has qualities that the conditioned living entities can have. Oh man, what happens in my head? The purpose of studying the Upanishad is to understand the transcendental quality of the absolute truth. as opposed to the material qualities of ignorance, passion, and goodness. That is the way of Vedic understanding. Great sages like the four Kumaras, headed by Sanaka, followed these principles of Vedic knowledge and came gradually from impersonal understanding to the platform of personal worship of the Supreme Lord. It is therefore recommended that we must follow the great personalities. Shukadeva Goswami is also one of the great personalities, and his answer to the inquiry of Maharaja Parikshit is authorized. One who follows in the footsteps of such great personalities surely walks very easily on the path of liberation and ultimately goes back to home, back to Godhead. That is the way of perfecting this human form of life. Shukadeva Goswami continued to speak to Parikshit Maharaja. My dear king, he said, I will narrate in this regard a nice story. This story is important because it is in connection with Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This narration is a conversation between Narayana Rishi and the great sage Narada. Narayana Rishi still resides in Padarikashrama in the Himalayan hills and is accepted as an incarnation of Narayana. Once when Narada, the great devotee and ascetic amongst the demigods, was traveling in different planets, he decided to personally meet the ascetic Narayana in Padarikashrama and offer him his respects. This great sage, incarnation of Godhead, Narayana Rishi, has been undergoing great penances and austerities from the very beginning of the creation in order to teach the inhabitants of Bharatavarsha how to attain the highest perfectional stage of going back to Godhead. His austerities and penances are exemplary practices for the human being. Badarikashrama is situated in the northernmost part of the Himalayan mountains and is always covered with snow. Religious Indians still go to visit this place during the summer season when the snowfall is not very severe. Once the incarnation of God Narayana Rishi was sitting amongst many devotees in the village known as Kalabagrama. Of course, these were not ordinary sages who were sitting with him. The great sage Narada also appeared there. After offering his respects to Narayana Rishi, Narada asked him exactly the same question asked by King Parikshit of Sukadeva Goswami. When Narada asked his question of Narayana Rishi, the Rishi also answered by following in the footsteps of his predecessors. Okay, he narrated a story of how the same question had been discussed on the planet known as Janaloka. Janaloka is above the Svarikaloka planets, such as the Moon, Venus, etc. In this planet, great sages and saintly persons live, and they were also discussing the same point regarding the understanding of Brahman and his real identity. The great sage Narayana began to speak. My dear Narada, he said, I will tell you a story which took place long ago. There was a great meeting of the denizens, of the heavenly planets, and almost all the important brahmacharis, such as the four Kumaras, Sanandana, Sanaka, and Sanatana Kumara, attended. Their discussion was on the subject matter of understanding the absolute truth, Brahman. You were not present at that meeting because you went to see my expansion Aniruddha, who lives on the island of Shvetadvipa. In this meeting, all the great sages and brahmacharis very elaborately discussed the point about which you have asked me, and it was very interesting. The discussion was so delicate that even the Vedas were unable to answer the intricate questions raised. Narayana Rishi told Narada Ji that the same question which Narada Ji had raised had been discussed in that meeting in Janaloka. This is the way of understanding through the parampara or disciplic succession. Maharaja Parikshit was sent to Shukadeva Goswami. Shukadeva Goswami referred the matter to Narada, who had in the same way questioned Narayana Rishi who had put the matter to still higher authorities in the planet of Janaloka, where it was discussed among the great Kumaras, Sanat, Sanatana, Sanaka, Kumara, and Sanandana. These four brahmacharis are recognized scholars in the Vedas and Shastras. Their unlimited volumes of knowledge, backed by austerities and penances, are exhibited by their sublime ideal character. They are very amiable and gentle in behavior, and for them there is no distinction between friends, well-wishers, and enemies. Being transcendentally situated, such personalities as the Kumaras are above all material considerations and are always neutral in respect to material dualities. In the discussions had among the four brothers, one of them, namely Sanandana, was selected to speak, and the other brothers became the audience to hear him. Sanandana said, after the dissolution of the whole cosmic manifestation, the entire energy and the whole creation in its nucleus form enters into the body of Karbodakashayi Vishnu. The Lord at that time remains asleep for a long, long time. Where there is again necessity of creation, the Vedas personified assemble around the Lord and begin to glorify him, describing his wonderful transcendental pastimes. It is exactly like a king. When he is asleep in the morning, the appointed reciters come around his bedroom and begin to sing of his chivalrous activities. And while hearing of his glorious activities, the king gradually awakens. The Vedic reciters or the personified Vedas sing thus, O unconquerable, I'm sorry, O unconquerable, you are the supreme personality. No one is equal to you or greater than you. No one can be more glorious in his activities. All glories unto you, all glories unto you. By your own transcendental nature, you fully possess all six opulences. Okay, does anyone want to continue? Go on. There's only three of us.
Yes, Prabhu.
Suchai, do you want to continue?
Haribo. Okay, I can answer it. By your own transcendental nature, you fully possess all six opulences. As such, you are able to deliver all conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. O Lord, we fervently pray that you kindly do so. All the living entities, being your parts and parcels, are naturally joyful, eternal, and full of knowledge. But due to their own faults, they try to imitate you by trying to become the supreme enjoyer. Thus, they disobey the supremacy and become offenders. And because of their offenses, your material energy has taken charge of them. Thus, their transcendental qualities of joyfulness, bliss, and wisdom has been covered by the clouds of three material qualities. This cosmic manifestation, made of the three material qualities, is just like a prison house for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls are struggling very hard to escape from the material bondage, and according to their different conditions of life, they have been given different types of engagement. But all engagements are based on your knowledge. Pious activities can be executed only when inspired by your mercy. Therefore, without taking shelter at your lotus feet, one cannot surpass the influence of material energy. Actually, we as personified Vedic knowledge are always engaged in your service to help the conditioned soul understand you. This prayer of the Vedas personified illustrates that the Vedas are meant for helping the conditioned souls to understand Krishna. All the Shrutis or personified Vedas offer glories to the Lord again and again, singing Jai, Jai. This indicates that the Lord is praised for his glories. Of all his glories, the most important is his causeless mercy upon the conditioned souls in reclaiming them from the clutches of Maya. There are unlimited numbers of living entities in different varieties of bodies, some moving and some standing in one place, and the conditioned life of these living entities is due only to their forgetfulness of their eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity wants to lord it over the material energy, imitating the position of Lord Krishna, he is immediately captured by the material energy and according to his desire is offered a variety of 8.4 million material kinds of bodies. Although undergoing the threefold miseries of material existence, the illusioned living entity falsely thinks himself the master of all he surveys. All under the spell of material energy, which represents the threefold material qualities, the living entity is so entangled that it is not at all possible for him to become free unless he is graced by the Supreme Lord. The living entity cannot conquer the influence of the material nature, of the material modes of nature, by his own endeavor. But because material nature is working under the control of Supreme Lord, the Lord is beyond its jurisdiction. Except for him, all living entities, beginning from Brahma down to an ant, are conquered by the contact of material energy, contact of material nature. Because he possesses in full the six opulences of wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, the Lord alone is beyond the spell of material nature. Unless the living entity is situated in Krishna consciousness, he cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet the Lord, by his omnipotency, can dictate from within as the super soul. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord advises, whatever you do, do for me. Whatever you eat, first of all, offer to me. Whatever charity you want to give, first give to me. And whatever austerities and penances you want to perform, perform for me. In this way, the karmis are directed to gradually develop Krishna consciousness. Similarly, Krishna directs the philosophers to approach him gradually by discriminating between Brahman and Maya. At last, when one is mature in knowledge, he surrenders unto Krishna. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, after many, many births, the wise philosopher surrenders unto me. The yogis are also directed to concentrate their meditation upon Krishna within the heart, and by such continued process of Krishna consciousness, the yogi can become free from the clutches of material energy. But as is stated in Bhagavad Gita, because the devotees are engaged in devotional service with love and affection from the very beginning, the Lord directs them so that they can approach him without difficulty of deviation. Only by the grace of the Lord can the living entity understand the exact position of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The statements of the personified Vedas give clear evidence that the Vedic literature is presented only by understanding Krishna. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that through all the Vedas, it is Krishna alone who has to be understood. Krishna is always enjoying, either in the material world or in the spiritual world, because he is the supreme enjoyer. For him, there is no distinction between the material world and spiritual worlds. The material world is an impediment for the ordinary living entities because they are under its control. But Krishna, being the controller of the material world, has nothing to do with the impediments it offers. Therefore, in different parts of the Upanishads, the Vedas declare, Brahman is eternal, full of all knowledge and all bliss, but the one Supreme Personality of Godhead is existing in the heart of every living entity. Because of his all-pervasiveness, he is able to enter not only into the hearts of the living entities, but even into the atoms also. As the super soul, he is the controller of all activities of the living entities. He is living within all of them and witnessing their actions, allowing them to act according to their desires, and also giving them the results of their different activities. He is the living force of all things, but still he is transcendental to the material qualities. He is omnipotent, he is expert in manufacturing everything, and on account of his superior natural knowledge, he can bring everyone under his control. As such, he is everyone's master. He is sometimes manifest on the surface of the globe, but he is simultaneously within all matter. Desiring to expand himself in multi forms, he glanced over the material energy and thus innumerable living entities became manifest. Everything is created by his superior energy, and everything in his creation appears to be perfectly done without deficiency. Those who aspire for liberation from this material world must therefore worship the Supreme Person of Godhead, the ultimate cause of all causes. He is just like the total mass of earth, from which varieties of earthly pots are manufactured. The pots are made of earthly clay. They rest on the earth, and after being destroyed, their elements ultimately merge back into earth. Although the person of Godhead is the original cause of all varieties of manifestation, the impersonalists especially stress the Vedic statement, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, everything is Brahman. The impersonalists do not take into account the varieties of manifestation emanating from the supreme cause of Brahman. They simply take into consideration that everything emanates from Brahman and after destruction merges into Brahman, and that the intermediate stage of manifestation is also Brahman. Although the Mayavadis believe that prior to its manifestation the cosmos was in Brahman, after creation it remains in Brahman, and after destruction it merges into Brahman, they do not know what Brahman is. This fact is clearly described in Brahma Samhita. The living entities, space, time, and the material elements like fire, earth, sky, water, and mind constitute the total cosmic manifestation known as Bhurbhuva Svaha, which is manifested by Govinda. It flourishes on the strength of Govinda, and after annihilation enters and is conserved in Govinda. Lord Brahma therefore says, I worship Lord Govinda, the original personality, the cause of all causes. The word Brahman indicates the greatest of all and the maintainer of everything. The impersonalists are attracted by the greatness of the sky, but because of their poor fund of knowledge, they are not attracted by the greatness of Krishna. In our practical life, however, we are attracted by the greatness of a person and not by the greatness of a big mountain. Actually, the term Brahman can be applied to Krishna only. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna admitted that Lord Krishna is Param Brahman, or the supreme rest of everything. Krishna is the supreme Brahman because of his unlimited knowledge, unlimited potencies, unlimited strength, unlimited influence, unlimited beauty, and unlimited renunciation. Therefore, the word Brahman can be applied to Krishna only. Arjuna affirms that because the impersonal Brahman is the effulgence emanating as rays of Krishna's transcendental body, Krishna is the Param Brahman. Everything is resting on Brahman, but Brahman itself is resting on Krishna. Therefore, Krishna is the ultimate Brahman or Para-Brahman. The material elements are accepted as inferior energies of Krishna because by their interaction the cosmic manifestation takes place, rests on Krishna, and after dissolution again enters into the body of Krishna as his subtle energy. Krishna is therefore the cause of both manifestation and dissolution. Sarvam kalvim idam brahma means everything is Krishna, and that is the vision of Mahabhagavatas. They see everything in relation to Krishna. The impersonalists argue that Krishna has transformed himself into many, and therefore everything is Krishna, and worship of everything is worship of him. This false argument is answered by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Although everything is a transformation of the energy of Krishna, he is not present everywhere. He is simultaneously present and not present. By his energy, he is present everywhere, but as the energetic, he is not present everywhere. This simultaneous presence and non-presence is inconceivable to our present senses. But a clear explanation is given in the beginning of the Ishopanishad, in which it is stated that the Supreme Lord is so complete that although unlimited energies and transformations are emanating from Krishna, Krishna's personality is not in the least bit transformed. Therefore, since Krishna is the cause of all causes, intelligent persons should take shelter of his lotus feet. Krishna advises everyone just to surrender unto him alone, and that is the way of Vedic instruction. Since Krishna is the cause of all causes, he is worshipped by all kinds of sages and saints by observance of the regulative principles. When there is a necessity for meditation, Great personalities meditate on the transcendental form of Krishna within the heart. In this way, the minds of great personalities are always engaging Krishna. With the minds engaging Krishna, naturally the captivated devotees simply talk of Krishna. Talking of Krishna or singing of Krishna is called Kirtana. Lord Chaitanya also recommends Kirtaniya Sadahari, which means always thinking and talking of Krishna and nothing else. That is called Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is so sublime that anyone who takes to this process is elevated to the highest perfection of life, far, far beyond the concept of liberation. In the Bhagavad Gita, therefore, Krishna advises everyone to always think of him, render devotional service to him, worship him, and offer obeisances to him. In this way, a devotee becomes fully Krishnaized, and being always situated in Krishna consciousness ultimately goes back to Krishna. Haribol. Okay, Ero Prabhu, you can read.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Sorry, nappi jotenkin meni sivuun. Although the Vedas have recommended worship of different demigods as different parts and parcels of Krishna, it is to be understood that such instructions are meant for the less intelligent class of men who are still attracted by material sense enjoyment. But the person who actually wants perfect fulfillment of the mission of human life should simply worship Lord Krishna, and that will simplify the matter and completely guarantee the success of his human life. Although the sky, the water, and the land are all part and parcel of the material world, when one stands on the solid land, his position is more secure than when he stands in the sky or the water. An intelligent person, therefore, does not stand under the protection of different demigods, although they are part and parcel of Krishna. Rather, he stands on the solid ground of Krishna consciousness. That makes his position sound and secure. Impersonalists sometimes give the example that if one stands on a stone or a piece of wood, one certainly stands on the surface of the land, because the stone and wood are both resting on the surface of the earth. But it may be replied that if one stands directly on the surface of the earth, he is more secure than on the wood or stone which are resting on the earth. In other words, taking shelter of Paramatma or taking shelter of impersonal Brahman is not as secure a course as taking direct shelter of Krishna in Krishna consciousness. The position of the jnanis and yogis is therefore not as secure as the position of devotees of Krishna. Lord Krishna has therefore advised in the Bhagavad Gita that only a person who has lost his senses takes to the worship of demigods. Only a person who has lost his senses takes to the worship of demigods. And regarding persons who are attached to the impersonal Brahman, the Srimad Bhagavatam says, My dear Lord, those who are thinking of themselves as liberated by mental speculation are not yet purified of the contamination of material nature because of their inability to find the shelter of your lotus feet. Although they rise to the transcendental situation of existence in impersonal Brahman, they certainly fall from that exalted position because they have neglected to desire your lotus feet. Lord Krishna therefore advises that the worshippers of the demigod are not very intelligent persons because they derive only temporary exhaustible results. Their endeavors are those of less intelligent men. But the Lord assures that his devotee has no fear of falling. The personified Vedas continued to pray, Dear Lord, considering all points of view, if one has to worship someone superior to him, then just out of good behavior, one should stick to the worship of your lotus feet, because you are the ultimate controller of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. You are the controller of the three worlds, Bhur, Bhuvar, and Svar. You are the controller of the 14 upper and lower worlds, and you are the controller of the three material qualities. Demigods and persons advanced in spiritual knowledge are always engaged in hearing and chanting about your transcendental pastimes, because this has the specific potency of nullifying the accumulated results of sinful life. Intelligent persons factually take a dip in the ocean of your nectarian activities and very patiently hear of them. Thus, they immediately become freed from the contamination of the material qualities. They do not have to go under. I'm sorry. They do not have to undergo severe penances and austerities for advancement of spiritual life. This chanting and hearing of your transcendental pastime is the easiest process for self-realization. Simply by submissive oral reception of the transcendental message, one's heart becomes cleansed of all dirty things. Thus, Krishna consciousness becomes fixed in the heart of a devotee. The great authority Bhishma Deva has also given the opinion that this process of chanting and hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the essence of all Vedic ritualistic performances. Dear Lord, the devotee who wants to elevate himself simply by this process of devotional activities, especially by hearing and chanting, very soon comes out of the clutches of the dualities of material existence. By this simple process of penance and austerity, the supersoul within the devotee's heart becomes very pleased and gives the devotee directions so that he may go back to home, back to Godhead. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that one who engages all his activities and senses in the devotional service of the Lord becomes completely pacified because the supersoul is satisfied with him. Thus, the devotee becomes transcendental to all kinds of dualities, such as heat and cold, honor and dishonor. Being freed from all dualities, he feels transcendental bliss, and he no longer suffers cares and anxieties due to material existence. Okay, Bhagavad Gita confirms that the devotee who is always absorbed in Krishna consciousness has no anxieties for his maintenance or protection. Being constantly absorbed in Krishna consciousness, he ultimately achieves the highest perfection. While in the material existence, he lives very peacefully and blissfully without any cares and anxieties. And after quitting this body, he goes back to home, back to Godhead. The Lord confirms in the Bhagavad Gita, my supreme abode is a transcendental place where going no one returns to this material world. Anyone who attains the supreme perfection, being engaged in my personal devotional service in the eternal abode, reaches the highest perfection of human life and doesn't have to come back again to the miserable material world. My dear Lord, it is imperative that the living entities be engaged in Krishna consciousness, always rendering devotional service by prescribed methods, such as hearing and chanting and executing your orders. If a person is not engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, it is useless for him to exhibit the symptoms of life. Generally, it is accepted that if a person is breathing, he is alive, but a person without Krishna consciousness may be compared to a bellows in a blacksmith's shop. The big bellows is a bag of skin which exhales and inhales air, and a human being who is simply living within the bag of skin and bones without taking to Krishna consciousness and loving devotional service is no better than the bellows. Similarly, a non-devotee's long duration of life. A non-devotee's long duration of life is compared to the long existence of a tree. His voracious eating capacity is compared to the eating of dogs and hogs, and his enjoyment in sex life is compared to that of hogs and goats. The cosmic manifestation has been possible because of the entrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Mahavishnu within this material world. The total material energy becomes agitated by the glance of Mahavishnu, and only then does the interaction of the three material qualities begin. Therefore, it should be concluded that whatever material facilities we are trying to enjoy are available only due to the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Within the body, there are 5 different departments of existence, known as Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and at last Anandamaya. In the beginning of life, every living entity is food conscious. A child or an animal is satisfied only by getting nice food. This stage of consciousness in which the goal is to eat sumptuously is called Annamaya. Anna means food. After this, one lives in the consciousness of being alive. If one can continue his life without being attacked or destroyed, one thinks himself happy. This stage is called Pranamaya, or consciousness of one's existence. After this stage, when one is situated on the mental platform, that consciousness is called Manomaya. The material civilization is primarily situated in these 3 stages, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya. The first concern of civilized persons is economic development. The next concern is defense against being annihilated, and the next consciousness is mental speculation, the philosophical approach to the values of life. If by the evolutionary process of philosophical life one happens to reach to the platform of intellectual life and understands that he is not this material body, but is a spirit soul, then by evolution of spiritual life, he comes to the understanding of the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Soul. When one develops his relationship with him and executes devotional service, that stage of life is called Krishna consciousness, the Anandamaya stage. Anandamaya is the blissful life of knowledge and eternity. As it is said in the Vedanta Sutra, Anandamayo Vyasat. The Supreme Brahman and the subordinate Brahman, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities, are both joyful by nature. As long as the living entities are situated in the lower 4 stages of life, Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, they are considered to be in the material condition of life. But as soon as one reaches the stage of Anandamaya, he becomes a liberated soul. This Anandamaya stage is explained in the Bhagavad Gita as the Brahma Bhuta stage. There it is said that in the Brahma Bhuta stage, stage of life, there is no anxiety and no hankering. This stage begins when one becomes equally disposed toward all living entities, and it then expands to the stage of Krishna consciousness, in which one always hungers to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This hungering for advancement in devotional service is not the same as hungering for sense gratification and material existence. In other words, hungering remains in spiritual life, but it becomes purified when our senses are purified. But it becomes purified when our senses are purified. They become freed from all material stages, namely Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, and they become situated in the highest stage, Anandamaya, or blissful life in Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi philosophers consider Anandamaya to be the state of being merged in the Supreme. To them, Anandamaya means that the super soul and the individual soul become one. But the real fact is that oneness does not mean merging into the Supreme and losing one's own individual existence. Merging in the spiritual existence is the living entity's realization of qualitative oneness with Supreme Lord in his eternity and knowledge aspects. But the actual Anandamaya, blissful stage is obtained when one is engaged in devotional service. That is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Mad Bhaktim Lapate Param. The Brahma Bhuta Anandamaya stage is complete only when there is the exchange of love between the supreme and the subordinate living entities. Unless one comes to this Anandamaya stage of life, his breathing is like the breathing of a bellows in a blacksmith's shop. His duration of life is like that of a tree, and he is no better than the lower animals like the camels, hogs, and dogs. Undoubtedly, the eternal living entity cannot be annihilated at any point, but the lower species of life exist in a miserable condition, whereas one who is engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Lord is situated in the pleasurable or Anandamaya status of life. The different stages described above are all in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although in all circumstances there exists both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities, the difference is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead always exists in the Anandamaya stage, whereas the subordinate living entities, because of their minute position as fragmental portions of the Supreme Lord, are prone to fall to the other stages of life. Although in all the stages both the Supreme Lord and the living entities exist, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always transcendental to our concept of life, whether we are in bondage or in liberation. The whole cosmic manifestation becomes possible by the grace of the Supreme Lord. It exists by the grace of the Supreme Lord, and when it's annihilated, it merges into the existence of the Supreme Lord. As such, the Supreme Lord is the supreme existence, the cause of all causes. Therefore, the conclusion is that without development of Krishna consciousness, one's life is simply a waste of time. Those who are very materialistic and cannot understand the situation of the spiritual world cannot understand the abode of Krishna. For such persons, great sages have recommended the yogic process whereby one gradually rises from meditation on the abdomen, which is called Muladhara or Manipuraka meditation. Muladhara and Manipuraka are technical terms which refer to the intestines within the abdomen. Grossly materialistic persons think that economic development is of foremost. Oh, my camera now went now. Development is of foremost importance because they are under the impression that the living entity exists only by eating. Such grossly materialistic persons forget that although we may eat as much as we like, if the food is not digested, it produces the troubles of indigestion and acidity. Therefore, in itself, eating is not the cause of the vital energy of life. For digestion of eatables, okay. For digestion, we have to take shelter of another superior energy, which is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as Vaishvanara. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that he helps the digestion in the form of Vaishvanara. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is all pervasive. Therefore, his presence as Vaishvanara is not extraordinary. Krishna is actually present everywhere. The Vaishnava therefore marks his body with temples of Vishnu. He first marks a Tilaka temple on the abdomen, then on the chest, then between the collarbones, then on the forehead, and gradually he marks the top of the head, the Brahmarandhara. Randhara and Mas. No. The 13 temples of Tilaka marked on the body of a Vaishnava are known as follows. On the forehead is the temple of Lord Keshava. On the belly is the temple of Lord Narayana. On the chest is the temple of Lord Madhava. And on the throat, between the two collarbones, is the temple of Lord Govinda. On the right side of the waist is the temple of Lord Vishnu. On the right arm is the temple of Lord Madhusudana. And on the right side of the collarbone is the temple of Lord Trivikrama. Hari Bol. Next can come Sami Prabhu, I guess.
Hare Krishna. Similarly, on the left side of the waist is the temple of Lord Vamana Deva. On the left arm is the temple of Sridhara. On the left side of the collarbone is the temple of Rishikesha. On the upper back is the temple called Padmanabha. And on the lower back is the temple called Damodara. On the top of the head, the temple is called Vasudeva. This is the process of meditation on the Lord's situation in the different parts of the body. But for those who are not Vaishnavas, great sages recommend meditation on the bodily concept of life, meditation on the intestines, on the heart, on the throat, on the eyebrows, on the forehead, and then on top of the head. Some of the sages in the disciplic succession from the great saint Aruna meditate on the heart because the super soul is also staying within the heart, along with the living entity. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, wherein the Lord states, I am situated in everyone's heart. For the Vaishnava, the protection of the body for the service of the Lord is part of devotional service. But those who are gross materialists accept the body as the self. They worship the body, but by the yogic process of meditation on the different bodily parts, such as Mani, Puraka, Dahara, and Hridaya, gradually rising to the Brahmarandra on top of the head. The first-class yogi, who has attained perfection in the practice of the yoga system, ultimately passes through the Brahmarandra to any of the planets in either the material or spiritual worlds. Yes, this is interesting point. That to the higher planets, they exit through this Brahmarandra on top of the head. And when one goes to the lower planets, I've heard that they exit the body from the rectum area. How a yogi can transfer himself to any other planet is very vividly described in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In this regard, Shukadev Goswami has recommended that the beginners worship the Virat Purusha, the gigantic universal form of the Lord. One who cannot believe that the Lord can be worshipped with equal success in deity or archa form, or who cannot concentrate on this form, is advised to worship the universal form of the Lord. The lower part of the universe is considered the feet and legs of the Lord's universal form, and the middle part of the universe is considered the navel or abdomen of the Lord. The upper planetary systems, such as Janaloka and Maharloka, are the heart of the Lord, and the topmost planetary systems, Brahmaloka, is considered the top of the Lord's head. There are different processes recommended by great sages according to the position of the worshipper, but the ultimate aim of all meditational and yogic process is to go back home, back to Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, anyone who reaches the highest planet, the abode of Krishna, or even the Vaikuntha planets, never has to come down again to this miserable material condition of life. Okay, Haribo, we can go it here because, yeah, yes, Prabhu. Because this chapter will continue for over 50 pages. So we cannot read 50 pages now, so we need to stop here where it was. And we continue tomorrow. Ribo. Okay, now let's go to 6 Astakam prayers. Cheto darpanamarjanam bhavamaha davagirvapanam shreyah kairava chandrika vitaranam Yavadu jivanam anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam purnam pitasvadanam sarvatma snapanam param vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam.
Nam Namakari Bahudani Sarva Shaktis. I can see. Okay, Tatrar Pitani Nitya Niyamit. Why can't I zoom it? Okay, I'll just wait. Tatrarpitani yamita smarane nakala. Eta tritava kripa bhagavan manapi. Durdaivam itrisam irajani nanuragaha. Okay, sorry it took so long time.
Trinadapi sunicena tarorapi sahishnuna manina manadena kirtaniya sadahari.
Natanam narchanam nasundarim kavitam vajagat karnaye mamarchan manichan manishvare bhavatat bhaktirahaitu kitvaji.
Ainanda tanuja kinkaram paditamam vishame bhavam budau kripaya tava pada pankaja stita duli sadrisam vichintaya.
Ayanam kalat ashru taraya madaram gat kada rutaya gira pulakarni chitam vapu kada tavanama karaha grahane pavishyati.
Yugaitam nimeshena chakshusha pravirshayitam shunyayitam jagat sarvam govinda virahena me.
Ashlishyava padaratam pinastumam adarshanan marmatam karotuva yata tata vavidata tulampato matprananatastu saevana para.
Rivo. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious.
O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them.
One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly.
O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth.
O son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet.
O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name?
O Govinda, feeling of separation, some considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence.
I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally.
Haribo, Shri Siksastagam ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Panchatattva ki jai, Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Jagat Guru Shila Bhaktivedanta Swami Shila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bo.